is James Keith Walton. I'm going to talk to you about one of the central pieces of my campaign, and that would be to develop and build cities. As we know, millennials and Gen Z are very, very low, have a very low percentage of home ownership. This is a real problem. Part of that has to do with income, part of that has to do with the banking industry. For whatever reason, we have a lot of people who are poor and really can't afford much. But we also have people who can afford something, but they can't find anything. We need to do something about this. So central to one of my platforms is to do something about that. Now, if you're watching this video, then you've watched my announcement video, and I've touched on that subject in that video. So what I was talking about was, I mentioned finding federal land on old World War I and World War II bases across the United States and building a number of cities. The number I mentioned would be 100 cities that would house approximately 250,000 people each. And if we followed this plan through, that would be the relocation of 23 million people into new cities that I call safe cities. And you say, well, why should we do this? Why would we make this kind of commitment? And it's really simple. 50% of our society makes less than $50,000 a year. We need to do something to help those families move forward. Now we spent a lot of money bailing out companies in the last 15 years. 2008, there was the housing bubble. We bailed out the banks and the auto industry. The pandemic, we bailed out some more banks and some more industries. But we really haven't invested. And just think, here we spend and increase our national debt $12 trillion in the last 12 years. It started out that we had about 11 or $12 trillion of debt, and now we're up to 22 trillion dollars in debt. And what do we have? We have a bunch of bankers that are making a lot of money. We have a lot of large businesses that seem to be fine and dandy, but the average citizen is not doing so well. So, when I say building cities, well, the idea I have for cities there, and the reason I want to put them on national land, there are several reasons. One, federal property is under the jurisdiction of the Provost Marshal's office. So we'd be able to get away from the vagaries and the different state laws and state laws, and be able to apply uniform federal law to any development in this national property. Well, what do you mean build cities, James? Well, what I mean is, there's a number of industries that we need in the United States. Okay, we all wear shirts, we all wear shoes, we all wear belts, we all need nurses, we need medical professionals, we need pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies. There's all these things that we need and use on a regular basis, and none of it's manufactured in the United States, a lot of it. I shouldn't say none, but a significant amount's not. It's hard to find a shirt that says made in the USA. It's hard to find a pair of pants that says made in the USA, or a belt, or anything. And this is due in large part because federal legislation made it convenient and profitable for corporations in the United States to move their operations overseas, move manufacturing out of the country. They were able to use cheap labor. Now, for years and years, if you had talked to me, I would have said, well, we're not in a fair competition with China because they basically have dirt cheap labor. And this is true. I've been to China, and I've talked to people who work in hotels in China. And they don't mind me asking them questions after I've been there a while, so I would talk to them. And the average worker there makes about $300 a month. They live in dormitories with other hotel workers, so they don't have to pay for their room, but still they have to buy food and buy their clothes, and they've got about $300 a month to do that with. Well, we've been competing with so many of our manufacturers went to other countries for the cheap labor. Doesn't mean that's right. That means it was profitable. Now, recently, and I say 2 or 3 days ago, and today's June 20th, a couple days ago, the Democrats revealed their plan, a $1.5 trillion plan to get things going. See, they want to build infrastructure, but it's not entirely infrastructure. For example, they had $100 billion they earmarked for developing the 5G network. Well, I don't know, I have mixed emotions about that. See, I pay for the internet service every month, have for years and years and years. And there's maybe a dozen cable companies in the United States, but there's only really 2 or 3 really big ones. And we're supposed to give them $100 billion worth of infrastructure when it's their business to develop this. I mean, so this is, again, this is really kind of a bailout for those companies. Oh, we're going to help you with $100 billion. That sounds more like a payoff to me. We have, they wanted to spend $60 billion on low-income housing, Section 8 homes. I've seen Section 8 homes. I've had friends that live there and I've gone to Section 8 homes. A lot of times they're not really well built. They're built by the lowest bid, the cheapest bid. Most of the time, any government contract is done that way. That doesn't necessarily make for the best construction. I think that $60 billion would be better spent, helping people get into housing that they own. See, we keep creating Band-Aids. And this is what I was looking at the Democrats' plan with $1.5 trillion. And they're doing it, and they're putting out all sorts of wild stuff, mostly to get votes. It's not about solving problems. This is about creating division and saying, we want power. Because this is really what politics in the United States is about right now, and that it has been for a while. It's about seizing and controlling power and the purse strings, and making money and getting their buddies and everybody else's friends' business. The Republicans are no better. Just look at the military-industrial complex. So my solution in looking at what can we do to get those 50% of society, 50% of the households, raise them up and get them into home ownership, especially the millennials and the Gen Z. And I came up with this actually years ago. And the nice thing about a good solution is that it should be invariant over time. And when I looked at my solution, I came up with a solution years ago, and I talked to people about it here and there. But now we have a pandemic, and I realized that the same solution I came up with back then is still a very good solution now. So here are the safe cities. Safe cities will be set up on a radius, in a radial design, circular design, and basically it'll have on the outside of the city a rail of some sort, either an electric-driven rail, because we want to be a little cleaner society, and along the outside edges of our city would be where our manufacturing plants are. That way we can have a plant here, we can have a plant here, we can have plants here, and it'll be easy to get these the goods manufactured in these plants moved out to market. the center of the city would be your offices, your municipal offices. It would be your hospital would be located. That's where your theaters would be. And you say, well, why would I want to join a new city? Well, there would be no traffic in the city. There'd only be allowed buses, electric buses, and public transportation. Every block you'd be required to walk a distance to some distance to a bus stop, and or the trolley stop, whatever is most effective, cost-effective, and electric means of mode of transportation. And the only other vehicles would be emergency vehicles that would be allowed to. They'd be geared to be able to go down these same roads. They'd be more narrow, and there'd be bike paths and paths. But the idea is that we build houses and neighborhoods, and we'd employ people. And you say, well, that sounds very fine and dandy, but what's the deal? So here's the deal. You sign up to be a new homesteader, and you're going to homestead. You're going to work like my ancestors worked to develop property, develop their lives, have a better life. New homesteaders would be required to participate in the policing of their neighborhoods. So everybody on a random day would have to go, it'd be posted. You'd have to go, and it'd be your turn to walk the neighborhoods as the peace officer. Of course, there would probably be police, I don't know. Since this is a new society, maybe we would learn to be not thieves, not liars and cheats. I don't know, that's a little bit much to expect. I would want the new cities to focus on a number of areas. Like I said, the manufacture of durable goods, like refrigerators, stoves, washing machines, pharmaceutical companies. We need to build more pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceutical manufacturers. You say, well, there already exists some. Well, yeah, there's pretty much 50 to 100 companies that have 7.8 billion customers, so that's not really competition. There's many, many, many prescriptions that are no longer trademarked, or no longer the time has passed where we can now replicate these and recreate those and sell those under generic brand names. And that saves people a lot of money buying generic. But we're still paying too much for these drugs because of the pharmaceutical companies. The profits on the pharmaceutical companies just astronomical. So what we need to do, we need to go smaller is better. We need to say to ourselves, wait a minute, big business is good, but it's only required in a few industries. The rest of the industries, it actually hurts us. When they started when companies started doing acquisitions and consolidation in various industries, the argument was that they would have a thing called economies of scale. And economies of scale would give the consumer incredible discounts. It saved us so much money. Well, that hasn't worked out that way at all. What happened was we had consolidation in industries, and then the prices went up because there was no competition. So we need to build manufacturing plants for pharmaceutical companies. And the people that would work, if this is a pharmaceutical manufacturer right here, well, the people that would work in that would live inside the circle in the city, and they would take the bus to work, and they would go and they would work their 8 hours, and then they would go home. Part of their being a new pioneer, new homesteader, would be that they would have to, like I said, participate in the policing of the city, but they would also be required to take classes and to teach classes if it was within them to do so. What do I mean by that? Well, if you know algebra and calculus, well, then you can teach algebra and calculus. And when I mentioned in my one of my videos on education, this is where we'll have the neighborhood, the one-room schoolhouse in the neighborhoods. So the city will be divided up into neighborhoods, and every neighborhood would have a small schoolroom, an apartment or a house that would be used as the schoolroom, and all the adults that needed education would be in attending school with the children who are wanting to learn, and we'd be able to raise up within 7 years a significant percentage of our people who are functionally illiterate and have no math skills. So the whole idea of becoming a pioneer, a homesteader, was to improve your lot in life. Well, you do that a number of ways. In the United States, we need people who are educated. We need people who can read. We need people who can write, communicate effectively. We need people who can critically think. And critically thinking people generally have some serious math skills, good math skills. So that's what we've got to do. We need nurses. There's a shortage of nurses in the United States. There's a shortage of nurses in healthcare all around the world. This is something that if we one of these industries, we could have a nursing college. We could have a medical teaching college. And you can't have one in each one of these cities. It's only 250,000 people. But you can have one every two. You know, you could have the city that's got nursing over there in that city. Pharmaceuticals, we need to put quite a few of these manufacturers in. They'd be able to provide drugs and the items that we need in our new cities for a very cost-effective price. But at the same time, we'd be able to sell the excess and provide cheap drugs to our neighbors and friends in South America and Central America in the form of aid. That seems like a very simple idea. Seems very ambitious. I heard someone say, wow, you know, it's just not realistic. You know, but what I'm looking at is 39 million people right now are unemployed. I don't think it's going to get better really fast. The pandemic continues, and it will continue. So when we accept that, well, we need something, big ideas, big plans to make it, but we need big plans that aren't Band-Aids and big plans that aren't giveaways. What we have is we want people to be homesteaders. We want them to end up owning property, living in a house, having decent education, and a place to raise their children where it's safe. Hence the safe cities. I was pleasantly surprised when I was watching a show on Walt Disney, about Walt Disney. And Walt Disney designed the cities of the future in his Epcot Center, and it was laid out very similar to this. So I don't know if I subconsciously took the idea from him, but it was a good idea. It's a good layout. So how would we do this process? How would we get the people to be the new homesteaders? Well, it would be open to anyone between the ages of 18 and 50. We could make it 55. We could negotiate that. Well, mostly I want it to be people who are energetic and starting new lives. I want them to be excited about it. We don't want when my ancestors were homesteading here out west, you know, you would not take a very, very old person with you most of the time because the hardship of the travel across the country in the covered wagon, that would end up killing them, you know. So that's the same kind of mentality thinking I'm using, is that, well, we don't want to burden ourselves with a bunch of people we have to take care of. What we want is a bunch of cities with people who are vibrant and working and moving forward and moving up. Well, what else? What are some of the other features about these cities? You know, I've thought about it quite a bit. And just imagine, you know, right now, if you want to have a TV show, you know, you've got to go to Hollywood or New York, plays, you know, the theater and the arts, you know, those are pretty much relegated to just very specific parts of the United States. And if you're not friends with those people, well, then you're not in. Just think, you're the city center, we'll have a community theater. You want to act, Okay, well, let's write some TV shows. Y'all, the opportunity for people to write and to produce would be much more here than it is today. We need to allow people to express themselves, and those people that have talent should be able to succeed at it. If they don't have talent, then eventually people would say, well, no, what you write is not very funny or humorous or very good, and then they would realize that they better get some other occupation. This would open us up to, having a more creative society, I believe. That and a better educated society. And so that's the Safe Cities pretty much in a nutshell. You would sign up, it would be open to everyone between the age of, say, 18 and 50. And if you signed up, it would be a random drawing. You would be processed in a random fashion, but your location would be random also. So if we're building 100 cities, we'll probably start out with 5 or 10, and so those would fill up first, prove the success, prove the idea, proof of concept. And so individuals would apply if they wanted to apply and be a new homesteader. And you say, well, what would be the benefit? Well, they would, if they stick with the program in 7 years, just like a lot of the Americans and people that came to the United States initially, they had a 7-year obligation before they could get a head right and land. Well, you play the game for 7 years, play the education game, play the work game. You say, well, wait a minute, how can we afford all this? Well, the fact is, until you hit the 7-year mark, you're pretty much not working for money. You're working for your home, you're working for the job, you're working to make this city successful. You say, well, geez, no money, that sounds like communism or something. No, it's not. See, under socialism and communism, all property is held in the public good, and no one owns anything. So, here, you're going to manufacture drugs in a pharmaceutical, we're going to sell those for profit, we're going to make money on those, and the profit will help pay for this. The nursing school will develop and create a whole new generation of RNs and LPNs, and they will go forward and they'll work in our cities, but they'll also work in other cities. They'll also work in other places. And after their tenure, then they'll be able to be a nurse anywhere they want to, but there'll be more nurses. We need nurses. We need doctors. We'll have teaching hospitals. So all of these would be, well, if you became a doctor through one of our hospitals, teaching hospitals, then of course you would, be obligated, if it took you 7 years to become a doctor, okay, well, you're going to work 7 more years, reimbursing society for allowing you to be a doctor. That's not such a big deal. You say, wow, that's a long piece of my life. Well, most people do that anyway. Most people that become officers in the military, they end up signing a commitment for 6 years. Most people who become engineers, they end up studying, if they get a master's degree in it, they're going to spend 6, 7 years working on their master's degree and getting that degree and incurring debt. And at the end of that, they're able to go out and make a living. A lot of professions are like that. So it's not unusual for people to spend extended periods of time gathering a skill, and then once they have that skill, using that skill before they start coming out ahead. And that's just part of life. Everybody owes bills, everybody has debts. But at the end of 7 years with this program, you'll end up living in a house and being part owner of the pharmaceutical company. You'll be part owner of that shirt manufacturer. You'll be part owner of that shoe manufacturer, of leather processing plant. You say, well, what do you mean by part owner? Well, as you become vested in it, you become a part owner of it. And it'll be up to then the people who own it and to make sure they've got a CEO and things along those lines to run the company profitably. And at the end of the day, an individual will be able to profit from the fruits of his labor as opposed to watch somebody else take it. Now, I realize this sounds very grandiose and really pie in the sky kind of stuff, but we need to get people working in productive, useful jobs once again. Years ago, people talked about, well, we're moving to a service society, we just got to give up manufacturing. And at the time, I would argue with them, and I finally get tired of arguing with them, and saying to them, well, you know, you're crazy if you think that everybody in the United States should be in a service society. That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to have a well-rounded society. We need people to make tables. We need people to make chairs. We need people to make furniture and carpet and shirts and shoes. We used to make it all here, and you know, we had top quality. It's respected around the world. And that slipped a lot. Like I said, we provided tax incentives to corporations to move away from the United States, and they did. So now we need to bring manufacturing back here, and the way to stimulate manufacturing here is to provide some sort of capability and some sort of money to do this. And you say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like free enterprise. Well, it is free enterprise, but the loan part of it is going to be government. You say, well, that might not be, that doesn't sound fair. Well, no, that's what we're competing with in the world. Many governments in this world provide cash to companies and to develop new industry, and that's just the way it is. Now, we're competing with those countries, and it's not fair that they get to build new mills and new manufacturing plants, and then on their government dime, and then they compete with us. And we can't compete with them because our equipment, our manufacturing techniques, our tools are older and antiquated, and they've got brand new on the dime of the country they're in. You know, whether that's China, whether that's Taiwan, whether that's Singapore, whether that's Vietnam, wherever it is, you know, there's lots of countries that have been supporting their industry this way for a long time, and the United States has not. So like I said, it's a matter of investment versus bailout. I'd rather invest in the country than bail out some more big banks. It used to be you could go to a community bank in the 1910, 1920, and if you had no collateral but they knew you, they would give you a loan. They were banking on the individual, not what the credit report says. I found it funny that right after we bailed out all the banks in 2008, one of the banks had the nerve to come back and say, oh, well, you know, right after that, they said, well, the United States has got so much debt, we're going to change the credit rating for the United States. And I thought, my gosh, these people wouldn't even be in business if we hadn't bailed them out with billions of dollars, because they couldn't manage their business, and they're telling us that they need to charge the United States more interest because they have too much debt. They have too much debt because we paid the banks money, but, oh yeah. So this is the kind of malarkey that goes on all the time in Washington State and Washington D.C. And so that's my safe cities. It's a good idea. It'll get people into homes. It'll give us a way to develop a cleaner society, one that's more ecologically grounded, but it'll allow people, the main thing is it'll allow people to move from apartments into home ownership.